It started with a $5 table. That's what people saw: cheap furniture, crowded stores, and those famous meatballs. But behind that, something didn't add up, because the company selling you that table doesn't actually own the brand. The reaction was immediate. In early 2026, tax authorities stepped in and said this whole system might be built to avoid taxes. At first, it looked like a normal corporate dispute, just another big company arguing over numbers. But that wasn't the real story, because this didn't happen overnight. This had been quietly building for years. For decades, IKEA was known for one thing: making stylish furniture cheap. That's what made it different. You could walk in, spend less, and still feel like you got something well designed. People trusted it because it felt efficient, almost genius. And for a long time, that worked. But slowly, something underneath started to change. At the center of this is something that sounds simple, almost too simple to matter. IKEA isn't really one company, it's a structure. And once you see that structure clearly, everything else starts to make sense. On one side, you've got the stores, the physical world, buildings, employees, inventory, logistics, all the messy and expensive parts of running a business, and that's where the real risk lives. Because if anything goes wrong, it hits here first. But on the other side, there's something far more powerful: the brand, the name, IKEA, the logo, the entire idea people trust when they walk into a store. And here's the key: those two sides are not the same thing, they are deliberately separated. And that separation is not an accident, it's the strategy. Because the stores carry the weight, they deal with the costs, the uncertainty, the daily pressure of actually selling products, while the brand sits above it all, untouched by the chaos. It doesn't deal with broken supply chains, it doesn't deal with unsold inventory, it doesn't deal with operational headaches, it simply gets paid. Every single store, no matter where it operates in the world, has to pay for the right to use that name, to use that identity, to tap into the trust that brand has already built. So even before a customer buys a single table or bookshelf, money is already moving. And for years, this worked almost perfectly. It was clean, efficient, and incredibly difficult to challenge. From the outside, it looked like a normal retail empire, but underneath it was something much smarter, a system designed to push risk in one direction while quietly pulling profits in another. And as long as governments accepted that structure, the machine kept running exactly as designed. But those conditions weren't permanent, and quietly, they were starting to disappear. At first, the pressure didn't look like much. It came in slowly, almost quietly. Governments around the world were starting to feel the strain, budgets tightening, expectations rising, and one thing became very clear: they needed more tax revenue. Naturally, attention began to shift toward the biggest players, the multinational companies operating across borders, moving money in ways that weren't always easy to follow. Regulators started asking more questions, looking a little closer, digging a little deeper. And on paper, IKEA's system still made perfect sense. Every part of the business paying for what it uses, clean, logical, structured, in a way that felt completely legitimate. But in reality, something underneath that structure was beginning to change, because the money wasn't just being earned anymore, it was being moved. Picture this for a second. A store operating in a country, doing well, generating millions in revenue, everything looking strong on the surface. But before taxes are even calculated, before the government takes its share, a bill shows up. Not a small one, a significant fee. And it's not for materials or logistics or staff. It's for the brand, the right to operate under the IKEA name. So that store pays the fee, and that payment doesn't stay in the same country. It moves. It crosses borders, often landing in places with very different tax rules. And just like that, the profit that once existed in that country starts to shrink. Legally, yes, but dramatically. And this is where things started to shift in a way that couldn't be ignored. Because from the outside, nothing looked broken. The stores were still open, customers were still buying, the business still appeared healthy. But governments were now seeing something different. Not just a successful company, but a system that was steadily pulling profits away from where they were actually being made. And once that realization set in, the conversation changed. Because what once looked smart started to reveal a hidden cost. It didn't take long before the pattern started to stand out. At first, it was just a few questions here and there, but then those questions became sharper, more direct. Tax authorities weren't just skimming the surface anymore. They were digging in, trying to understand what was really happening beneath the structure. And the question they kept coming back to was surprisingly simple. Does this actually reflect economic reality, or is it just a carefully designed way to move profits from one place to another? Because on paper, everything still looked legitimate. The agreements were in place, the payments were documented, the system followed the rules as they were written. But regulators had started to look beyond paperwork. They were no longer satisfied with how things were presented. They wanted to see how money actually flowed in practice, where it originated, where it ended up, and more importantly, why. At the same time, governments around the world were beginning to respond. New rules started to emerge, tighter frameworks, more coordination between countries, all aimed at closing the gaps that companies had been using for years. It wasn't just about increasing taxes anymore, it was about control, about making sure profits were being taxed where real economic activity was happening. And as that shift took hold, the pressure began to build. What once felt like a perfectly engineered system, something stable, predictable, even untouchable, was starting to feel exposed. The same structure that had created efficiency was now drawing attention. The same mechanisms that once went unquestioned were now being examined from every angle. And with every new investigation, every new policy, the space to operate quietly started to shrink. From the outside, the business still looked strong, still familiar, still successful. But underneath, the environment had changed completely. The margin for error was smaller, the tolerance for complexity was lower, and the cost of maintaining that structure was beginning to rise. And once that pressure reached a certain point, it didn't just stay pressure, it turned into something much harder to control. Then came the moment where everything that had been building quietly finally reached the surface at the same time. In early 2026, Australia moved forward with a $171 million tax claim, a figure that immediately drew attention, not just because of its size, but because of what it represented. Authorities argued that the internal payments within IKEA's structure didn't accurately reflect real business activity, that the fees flowing between entities were not just routine transactions, but part of a system that needed to be examined more closely. In their view, the structure itself wasn't just a background detail, it was the core of the issue. From the company's side, the response was expected. The model was defended, the structure explained, the logic behind it laid out in careful terms. After all, this was a system that had been built over years, refined to operate across borders, designed to separate responsibilities while maintaining control. To challenge it meant questioning not just one transaction, but the principles behind how the entire organization was set up. But the real tension wasn't in the back and forth arguments. It was in what this case could trigger. Because this wasn't just about a single payment or a single jurisdiction. It was about whether the foundation of the model could stand under scrutiny. If one authority demonstrates that parts of the structure don't align with how value is actually created, it opens the door for others to take a closer look. And once that door is open, the scale of the issue changes completely. What was once a quiet, efficient way of operating across countries begins to look more exposed. The same mechanisms that allowed profits to move smoothly now attract attention. The same design that provided stability now faces uncertainty. And in that moment, the perception shifts. A system that once protected billions by organizing them across borders is no longer just seen as a strength. It becomes the very thing that is being questioned, tested, and potentially challenged on a global level. Now the question is simple. Can this structure truly hold, or is this where it starts to unravel? Because this isn't only about IKEA. It's about what happens when a company shifts from selling products to engineering how money flows. Strength can come from structure, but so can exposure. So what comes next? Adaptation or collapse under pressure?